Okay, I think, okay. All right. Hello. Okay, so today I'm going to demo real quickly for you how to do the pinch pot as well as the coil construction pot, okay? The clay, you will get small amounts of clay you're going to need to put down the little mats, remember, so that the clay doesn't stick to the table. When you are making a pinch pot construction, you grab a hunk of clay and you just kind of form it into a circle. You want kind of like a coil, like a cylinder shape. You can change the shape of it. You're just going to mold it with your hands, okay? Once you kind of have the shape you're looking for, you start with your thumb and you press your thumb into the center. From there, you okay, Teddy? Yeah. You are going to carefully work your way around. This is pretty stiff clay today. You're going to work your way around. I can change hands, it doesn't matter. Kind of slowly open it up. When you're pressing it, the clay is getting thinner. You don't want it too thick. You want it maybe the thickness of your fingers. So as you're pressing it, you kind of get a sense for that as you're doing that, so that it doesn't get too thick. What happens if I have clay that's super thick? What's going to happen inside my kiln, Nicholas?
I'm going to explode or have air bubbles.
So by having it, and I'm kind of, this is cracking a little bit, I can kind of go back and I can press that together, okay? As this gets a little bit harder, I can go back with some of my tools or my fingers and I can smooth some of those cracks so that the surface looks nicer. That will be part of the expectation. You can't just say, oh, Mrs. Yaeger, I'm done, this is what I'm going to do. This is not good craftsmanship. You've all done clay before. I would assume that the expectations that your elementary school teacher had are pretty close to what my expectations are, okay? So you will go back and work. You can also do, like if as my top, I'm pressing it, it's starting to crack a little, I can get a ceramic knife and I can sort of trim the top, and this would help for craftsmanship as well, okay? Like I said, I could do this for a head of something. Maybe I'm making another structure and I'm going to do a coil construction and I'm going to use this for a different part of it. Maybe I'm going to do something where it looks like a robot and there's wheels. This could be sort of the wheel structure. Does that make sense? So I can start using these smaller pieces to make something bigger. Okay, so here's my little pinch pot. I cleaned up the top a little bit. I would spend a little bit more time on it for it to be finished. When you're done, where do we put our names typically and how do we do it? Do you remember? Kayla?
Would you like scratch your initials into the bottom of it?
Yep, I have some tools over here. These guys here have a nice tip on them. So I'm going to do my JY and I'm going to write 6A, we'll say. Okay? I can kind of go back and clean that up a little bit. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do it. When it is completely done and ready to go in the kiln, you're going to take this with your name on it. You're going to walk into my closet and you're going to put it right on the shelf in there. Okay, so that it's safe and protected. Now, coil construction, here are some examples. I have a variety of them here these are all mine. When you do coil construction, you can have combinations of different ways to present your coils, let's say. I can make sort of like a cinnamon roll to change the sort of shape of it so it has a detail in the thing. This one I started coming out a little bit, so I layered my coil a little bit wider than the base ones and I added a handle with my coil. Here the same thing, I started adding sort of like circles of clay so that it changed the design as well to make it more interesting. This one I did coils, but instead of smoothing them I used just my finger and I blended them up so that it had this really funky texture. This is a high fire glaze, so it gets these really crazy colors that happen, really darks, really lights. It kind of changes as it gets hotter. Okay? To start with the coil construction, I'm going to start with a pancake shape. So I'm going to start with my circle, and I'm going to flatten it out. By using the palm of my hands, that's the strongest part of my hand, I want to kind of get it as consistent as possible. This is a good thickness. Anything thinner than your little finger is too thin. It will be too fragile to put together. I'm going to set that down. When I make a coil, I'm gonna rip off a chunk and I'm gonna start it a little bit the same way where I sort of wanna make it into a ball. As I do that, I can kind of work it into the shape of a coil. So it's gonna be kind of a wide coil. I kind of pinch it. I want it to be consistent as much as it can be all the way along. If I have a big sort of like bump in the middle, it's gonna be hard when I start to roll it. It won't roll evenly. So I'm gonna put it down. I'm gonna use the palm of my hands again so that I don't put finger grooves in it so that it's all the same. I usually stand up for this. My suggestion would be to stand up. You have a better sense of like using your arms more than if you're just sitting here and you're using your fingers. You wanna kind of have this going wider. It will make your coil much smoother looking and the same consistency all the way along, okay? So there's my first coil. I'm gonna do one more, and then I'm gonna get the two other tools that I'm going to need to finish putting this together. As long as this one's a little thinner than this, but it's pretty much the same width all the way along, that's what you're looking for. If you have a coil that looks like this, it starts to fall apart, that's not a good coil. That's also way too tiny to do anything with. When you start to slip and score it together, you don't have enough clay to move around to make it sturdy enough. So this is what I'm looking for. This is about the size of your small finger or a Sharpie marker. Do you see the difference? Okay, because you have to demo this for me when you... I have two tools that you can choose from. The next step to put these together are to score and slip your clay. So I'm going to leave it on my mat here. You can use a fork and I go right around the edge, kind of scratch it up. I'm going to take my coil and do the same thing. I'm going to scratch it up. I know I'm going to use about half, a little bit more than half of this. So I'm going to scratch it up. Then I'm going to lay it on here and I'm going to kind of measure it. If I have a knife still at my table, I can cut that to sort of stack it up. Do you see what I did? Okay. After I do that, I just take my finger. I don't make slip anymore because a lot of times we don't use it fast enough and it gets moldy and it smells awful. Oh, makes you want to be sick. So we are going to just get that wet. You're going to also get this wet. You can see I don't have a lot of water. You don't need a lot. This is pretty good clay. This was hard because it was kind of cut off the top, but now that I've cut off of the larger chunk, it has a nice moisture content to it, so it's holding up really well. So you want to kind of press these together so the clay kind of gets stuck together. Then you want to blend these two together so that they start to join together. You can reconnect the clay pieces. So I'm going to pull this up and blend it. And as I go, I can kind of smooth some of that. Sometimes you get extra clay pieces and you can smooth that out, okay? I'm not trying to work more than I have to with the clay. The more my hands touch it, who can tell me what's going to happen to the clay? What's that one rule? Yes, you're the only one.
Doesn't it dry out faster?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to do it as little bit as possible. Now the same thing's going to happen here. I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to blend that clay down into the base. This is not thick enough that I'm going to have bubbles in it that would pop or explode in the kiln. This is a good. Now my advice to you is to do this every time you add a coil. Because if you're doing it and say you have 4 or 5 coils and it's only this big, it gets really hard to get your hand inside there and to do it without damaging it. So I do one, I make sure it's pretty much smooth. It's not perfect, but I know that I have to keep adding things to it. So I could also do it this way where I can get a toothbrush wet. A little bit of clay in there. I'm going to scruff up the top edge of that and then my coil as well. It's kind of one-stop shopping, I guess, if you don't want to use the fork and then your finger. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to set that, measure it on top as well. This was kind of wet, so I'm pretty good to go. I'm going to set that there. Again, I'm going to press it together so that clay starts to get stuck to itself. And again, I'm going to blend Now, after this one, if you are interested in keeping that coil design for your final piece, you don't need to blend these outside ones together, but I am requiring you that you blend the inside together. No one sees the inside. Say you want to have it to hold water potentially. We know that it will be sealed completely and it will stay together. Now, in order to use clay, whatever you're doing, you are going to have to demo this for me. You have to make what I've just made, and you need to come and show Mrs. Yaeger. And I need to not be able to pull it apart. See how mine's sticking together? It's also a good size. It fits in my hand. It's not too big, it's not too small. Do you all see what I've just done? Okay. If it's good enough, you can keep going with your project. If it's something that you think, oh, I probably could do it better the second time, by the time you start again, it'll be even better. And I know that happened because that's how we did it last year. So as you go, you kind of keep adding. Once it gets a little firmer, you'll be able to do that smoothing so that it's a finished piece. Yes, Nicholas?
With that, you have to ask it. Do you do that specifically and then go show you?
Yes.
Or do you do the first layer on what you want to do with the clay and then show you? You do that.
You're going to show me. In order to use clay at the clay station, everybody has to make a mini coil construction piece so that I know how you slip and score and I know how you smooth and I know that you can roll out clay appropriately. Okie dokie? Awesome. Thank you for listening. If you are going to do clay, you still have to do all the planning work first, but this is now an option. Next class, I will demo slab construction for you.